as we're thinking about flow over fear, and we're thinking about this concept of fear, anxiety, putting yourself out there, personal branding, fatherhood, all of it is really related to this idea that you have something that you want to be in the world. You know, I say things like it's your personal brand, it's your legacy, but for fatherhood, your family, your children, they're your legacy to the world. And all of it has to deal with the fact that we have to get out in front of people. The number one fear. So check this out, right? If you were to think speaking in front of people, getting eaten by a shark, or getting burned alive, which one do you think people were more afraid of?
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Flow Over Fear podcast, where it is our mission to help you to rise above fear and realize your ultimate potential in leadership and life. I'm your host, Adam Hill, and it is my goal to share with you the human side of high performance. My guests share their experience with fear, anxiety, struggle, challenge, and most importantly, despite all of it, how they rose above it to achieve incredible results. So, if you're ready to rise up, let's get started.
Hey everyone, welcome to Flow Over Fear. I'm glad you're joining us today. I'm excited for our guest. He is Jay Twining, and we're going to talk about fatherhood today. And this is an important topic, and it's important for any parent, really, whether you're a mother or father. We want to talk about parenthood. And Jay is the host of the Feel Good Fatherhood podcast, which is a conversation interview format with fathers and people who serve as fathers, talking about their personal development, values, and perspective on fatherhood. And Jay's also a resident personal brand strategist with Brand Builders Group, the leading personal brand strategy firm where he has worked with New York Times bestselling authors, top 1% real estate firms, 10-figure entrepreneurs, elected state officials, and world-renowned speakers to develop their personal brands and marketing strategies that result in bigger incomes, bigger revenue streams for those folks. Jay, I have to start by thanking you, by the way, for helping me to start this podcast, because you were instrumental in helping me to learn about that, man. I appreciate that.
I think as we're thinking about flow over fear, and we're thinking about this concept of fear, anxiety, putting yourself out there, personal branding, fatherhood, all of it is really related to this idea that you have something that you want to be in the world. You know, I say things like it's your personal brand, it's your legacy, but for fatherhood, your family, your children, they're your legacy to the world. And all of it has to deal with the fact that we have to get out in front of people. The number one fear. So check this out, right? If you were to think speaking in front of people, getting eaten by a shark, or getting burned alive, which one do you think people were more afraid of?
Oh man, well, having been a swimmer in a past life, yes, sharks were always my biggest fear.
So check it out. So sharks is number 8.
Okay.
Being burned alive is number 3. And speaking in front of people, that's number 1. That's the number 1 fear people have.
Wow.
And so when we're kind of in this world of, you know, helping you and helping anybody else that wants to have a podcast, working in this world where we have a value proposition, we have some sort of message that we want to put out into the world, like kind of that first step everybody has to go through is just that fear and anxiety of, oh man, there's so much imposter syndrome. Like, am I good enough? Should I be doing this? Is my value and voice worthwhile? And, you know, and for you, it was an easy fit. It was like, yes, you got something to talk about. And so we're just kind of working through the steps and the mechanics to get the message out there and just help people. And that's really what it's all about. It's just about helping people.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, now I think it's important. I think the next question is, can you help me with getting over my fear of sharks then? That's the bigger, but no, I'm kidding. But
there's such an interesting, I forget who it was. It was like, I think it was like Andrew Huberman brought in David Goggins into his lab and put him in the VR helmet with swimming with the sharks. And like Goggins was just like completely like no change in heart rate, no change in nothing. And then Huberman was like, you're the only person that like has no reaction to sharks. And he's kind of like, nah, it's not real. It's VR. Like,
that's
but everybody, but this is what's fantastic about this story, right? Especially when it comes to fear. What it really shows is that fear's in here. And, and so for those that are listening, I pointed to my head. All your fear, it's in your head. Danger occurs in your heart and your body. Like if you're in danger, your body has a reaction. That's your adrenaline rush to either fight or flight. But fear, it's all in your head. It's not real. And so I think that one story, like Goggins he's a badass, right? So he's
Yeah.
like, he's a champion of everything he's doing. And he's a great model, and not everybody can do that. But that concept of getting aligned and understanding what your emotions are and where you're coming from. I mean, for you with the sharks, because you were actually in the water, it makes sense that you were like, you're actually responding to a danger. And so I would say, don't get over it. Pay attention to it. Cause it's real. I personally have a fear of water, because twice in my life, I almost drowned. And so I have now I'm a very strong swimmer. Let me qualify that, because when I think of very strong swimmer, I think of somebody that can go like in the currents of the ocean. So I'm not that strong, but I'm a competent swimmer. I can jump into a pool, be fine. I can jump into the ocean and be fine. But I think of I always, every time I get to the water, every time I'm about to jump in, I'm stopped. It's like lead feet. I cannot move.
Yeah.
It's like,
yeah.
I'm okay. I'm doing this to myself again. And it's constant, like running to that running to that doorway of fear, and just saying, all right, well, here's this door that's in front of me. There's a doorknob on it. I know exactly what I have to do to get through this door to the other side of whatever it is that I want to do. I just got to overcome this thing, overcome my brain, overcome my mind, overcome the fear that's in my head. And I can just open that door, even though it is a reaction to danger, open that door and just jump in and usually have fun with whoever's in the pool.
Right. Well, that's an interesting concept, because you're touching on that, I'd like to dig in a little bit, because the idea of standing at the shoreline or standing at the edge of the pool and having that initial fear set is, it's obviously something you want to rise above, and you figured out the tools to do that. But does it go away? Does immersion, literally and figuratively, help with that, or do you have to always do that practice?
A master of this, and I learned this principle from an old mentor in Landmark Forum. And so this was kind of a personal development kind of area, and I was at a conference, and he said, the difference between a regular person and a master is that the master has just changed their response time. They've just shortened the response time. And so I would have to jump into, and I'm not a neuroscientist, I'd have to jump into a lot more knowledge about, can fears actually get overcome? But I do know that from neuroplasticity, that when anything you experience in your brain, and you can either use neuroplasticity or epigenetics or whatever, it's really just saying that like you kind of learn and remember from experiences. I don't think your brain ever really forgets it.
Yeah.
So, yeah. I think that fear for me is kind of always going to be there. But my goal is to shorten that time one day I'm just going to walk up to the pool and just jump right in. And every once in a while it does happen, but it'll be every time. And I'll just get into the pool whenever I want to.
Yeah. Yeah. And I can definitely resonate with that. Myself having a fear of, you mentioned having fear of water. I never had near drowning experiences, but I did have a fear of open water swimming, like getting way out and swimming, kind of more of the agoraphobia, like just the fear of the open spaces kind of thing, and just being stuck. And that stays with me. Like I haven't been, when I was doing it frequently, it would be like, yeah, that time frame was shortened. You're right. But now that I've been out of the open water, if you put me in front of like the ocean right now and told me to swim out to the buoy, it would probably scare me. Yeah. So I could see that. I could definitely resonate with that. So yeah.
There's definitely a handful of situations in my life where I don't know if this will change. So for instance, I've only been skydiving once, and it was a tandem skydive, and it was something that I wanted to do for my entire life. And I absolutely love that I've done it. And I think it's like my oldest. I actually have a YouTube video. It was one of those ones where they give you the video. And so they sent me the video and I uploaded it to YouTube so that it was kind of in perpetuity there. And this was years ago. And now it's like whenever I get close to the edge of a building, like I have vertigo.
Oh yeah.
And that one is a physical reaction. But I think that for me, jumping out of the plane in the skydiving thing, and there's a handful of why it was so crazy for me. It's a tangible danger situation, because when we were preparing, they didn't tell me certain details about how we were going to jump out of the plane. And so what ended up happening was that we were there and ready. And so part of it is there's that like, oh, the door's open now and that's open air and we're just going to free fall. So that was already kind of an issue.
Yeah.
But the next step is, and with the tandem, is that like, they just walk you out. Like there's nothing you can really do. They're like, you're going out.
Right.
And they didn't prepare me for one detail, which like when I think back and I'm like, wow, I can't believe they did this. At this place where I went, we were head first. And so they said, all right, you're going out. So put your head back, like do this, hold on to your parachute, like put your head back and do that. And then, so I was like, okay, like, I was like, this is kind of weird. I don't know what's going on. And then when we went out, I was face down and like, I blacked out for like a second.
Oh, really?
I was just so like, oh my goodness, what's going on? And it was like, I think that was the furthest outside of just real comfort zone that I've ever been in. That was probably probably one of the scariest moments of my life. Just that, and only in that second, like it was only in that moment. Now I wasn't all that comfortable and I enjoyed it. I loved it. I had a great adrenaline rush, like, you know, like all the regular stuff that happens when you do extreme sports. Mm-hmm. And I love that I did it. I don't know if I want to do it again.
Sure.
So, but I think what's great about the memory is that we can always choose how we respond to these things that make us afraid. And whenever I get back to that edge, what I think about is, and what I remind myself is that, jumping out of the plane, so going skydiving, that was a bucket list thing. This is something I want to do in my life.
Yeah.
You know, like bungee jumping is not something I don't want to do. Bungee jumping, I have no interest, but jumping out of a plane, absolutely. I wanted to do it. The other big one that I haven't done is ice climbing. Like I love climbing. I love bouldering. I've done a couple multi-tiers. It's something I enjoy. I'd really like to go ice climbing in my life. Mm-hmm. And so, whenever I have that vertigo, I just try and remind myself like, hey, I have this vertigo because I pushed myself to an edge and I found this new edge. And, part of my acceptance of that is that when I was explaining my experience to some family members, they were just kind of like, oh, you know what? Like, you actually have a really good survival instinct, so you should be really happy about that. I was like, oh, that's good.
Right.
That's good. I like that framing. And so, I think, when we're thinking about the fear and thinking about all these kind of things, like it's good to acknowledge this thing happened. And I'm sensitive because, I've got daughters, and I think there are certain situations in everybody's life where you're having a fear or a dangerous reaction, and it's very difficult to frame it positively. Mm-hmm. But I just firmly believe in my heart that like everything that's happened in your life has led you to who you are today. And like, and really like the sum total of your confidence, your ability to overcome fear, create new experiences, to connect with other people is based on everything that's happened. Like everything. Mm-hmm. It's not healthy to live there, but it's healthy to be grateful for it. Like I'm grateful for that happening because of that thing happening, I'm now who I am today, and I can now share this story with you.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, I'm glad you did, because I never plan on skydiving, and so just at least living vicariously through you is good enough for me. So I'm grateful that you shared that with us, because some fears, it's like, I'm not quite wanting to rise above that fear.
So and just so helpful. You know, so we're brothers in this. I'm a land creature as well. I don't want to be in open ocean. Like I have no desire for that whatsoever. I also have this thing of sharks. So and when we combine that with the water thing, it's like, okay, like keep me on a mountain or something like that. I'm fine.
Right.
Give me a forest and I'm happy.
Definitely. Well, yeah, and you'd mentioned, you have daughters, and we were talking about kind of these acute fears of like, well, okay, a fear of falling out of a plane, that's obviously fear-inducing, but there's a fear we have as fathers, and you're obviously expert on this. You're doing a podcast on fatherhood, the Feel Good Fatherhood, and you are you have some expertise here. Can you kind of share a little bit about what how fears manifest as a parent, and how we can, I guess, rise above those and be better parents? Maybe that's a fully loaded question, but I'd love to hear your perspective on it.
There's a lot. So, and I'm really happy that you brought this up. So I think that we'll just kind of go through the age of what are just common fears. And I think it's funny because I think here's the other element is that most of the time as fathers, we're younger. 10 years ago, me, very different person, in terms of calmness, temperance, attitude, also gumption and gung-ho and energy, right? So I think that a lot of new fathers are joining the arena of fatherhood under this weird idea that nothing's really going to change. And most fathers, if they're kind of thinking about it in the present, they have a moment where the switch is flipped, where the light has turned on. You could say the blood, because the blood is going to the brain to the right spot of like, oh, that thing in there is that's going to change my life. I think that the first fear, and this is a very primal fear to just kind of understand and be aware of as a father, is that we don't know that it's our kid. That's like, and I think just being aware of this as a concept, because it's a very deep one. I didn't have it with my first child, but I had definite inner monologue of like, is this my kid? Like, is my wife is now pregnant again? Did this come from me? And I don't have any. There's no situation, and that's not something like some people deal with infidelity and kind of that doesn't happen for us. But and I was weird. Like, it was weird for me that this came up, and I even talked. I was like, this is irrational, because I know, like, we know the date it happened. Like, we were intentional about it. We like everything. So it's like, and everything lined up. Like, yep, that was the date. This has all happened. But there was definitely I can't see the kid. I don't know if it's mine, and I don't know what to do about that. And so I think that's something to be aware of if you're feeling that. I really like Winston Churchill when it comes to negative emotion, because he just basically says, like, look, if you're in a swamp, keep going, because you'll exit the swamp. So acknowledging the fact that you have this fear, have these negative thoughts, don't ruminate on them and don't hang out there, but maybe take out a journal, write it out, just jot down some thoughts, talk to a trusted, like if you got if there's another healthy man in your life that you can have a conversation with, have that conversation. If you have that kind of relationship with your wife, have that conversation with your wife. I guess the other permutations with your spouse, that conversation with your spouse,
sure,
et cetera, as it goes. But if you shine the light on the thing that you're afraid of, most of the time it just diminishes. I'm not a big fan of the movie It, but the most recent edition of it, and this is going to be a total spoiler. So, hey, if you haven't seen it and you want to do it, pause this, go watch it, and then come back for the rest of it.
Yeah. So all of my It fan club listeners out there, that I know there's a lot of you, please turn off this segment. So
So at the very end of the new run, so it is a creature. It's an alien creature that effectively kind of feeds on fear. It creates fear, and then it kind of feeds it. And as that fear increases, a phenomenon that's described, at least in that show, and kind of also, I would say anecdotally described as well, is that things that you're afraid of become bigger. And I think it's a function of, as human beings, we are focus machines.
Yeah.
Like, we are like super honed in on like, that thing's dangerous. I got to, like, if I take my eye off the thing that's dangerous, it's going to get me. Creatures in the dark, wolves in the forest, bears in the mountains, etc. Right. The whole gamut of that kind of stuff. If I don't look at the dangerous thing, it's going to get me.
Yeah.
And so they play on that in the movie, and the way that they resolve it. And it's so funny because the whole sequence of the part 2 is that they have this ritual that they can do to make it go away. Right. Yeah. It doesn't work. Right. Spoiler alert, doesn't work. But the way they defeat it is that they literally think it's smaller. Like, they literally overcome the fear in their head. They overcome the fact that, like, it is too big. It like, by the time they get to this point, it's monstrous. Like, it's it's like not quite kaiju like Godzilla, but like it's this monstrous thing. It's very scary. It's gross and scary looking, and they just kind of shrink, and then they defeat it. And it's just like, it's this really great, I think, analogy for shining the light on it. So if you have this fear of, I don't know if the kid is mine, first check in to see if it's real. Like I would say this, that like everybody is where they are. So if you're in a relationship where you might not know, have the conversation, right? We don't need another Maury's or whatever those daytime drama things are. Like we don't need any more of those conversations. Like legit, if it's an issue, like bring it up and talk. Like it's one of the things that differentiates us from every other mammal out there, is our ability to communicate, have abstract thoughts, and you need to be able to communicate this effectively. But if you're in a solid relationship and you're having this, just check in that like, hey, this is irrational. It's in my head. Talk about it and it might go away. So I think that's the first one. The next one is imposter syndrome. Mm-hmm. So the next big one that all fathers almost go through this is that like, am I good enough? Am I going to be good enough? Can I take care of it? Of concerns. So again, right now I just had a newborn, so 4 months old, and I had major provider fears last year. So once like it was right around, so it was summer, October, so 2-3 months. So pregnancy is very visible.
Sure.
Right. She's winding down, preparing for like the long haul to delivery. For me, like I had these major pressures of, oh my goodness, am I making enough money? Is the house ready? Is just going like that. Mm-hmm. So I think that that overwhelm, that fear, that anxiety there, again, that's just another thing to check in. The great thing is that we've been having kids for forever. There's never a right time. There's never a right amount of money. There's never a right amount of anything. You just have a kid.
Yeah.
That's it. Like,
yeah. And I've noticed too that, I mean, like even as they get older, those fears don't go away. I mean, it's just like, I still have that provider fear. It's like, man, I have 2 teenagers now and they're demanding money. And it's like, I don't know how I can support them if I'm, not making what we're making. So it's tough. Yeah.
Big part of here is that, again, we get to choose what we do with it. And there's some solutions. There's some perspectives. I'll say perspectives. Solutions not true, because there's no real, you don't solve fear, right? Like you don't solve an emotion. Right. There's some perspectives to think about when we hit these points of fear and anxiety. So that's the provider one. That's kind of a real one. That's another one. The next one is, am I going to hurt it? And so it's like babies are tougher than we think, but they're not toys, right? And so it's never like, I don't really know this, but like when I held my first, there was definitely am I doing this right? Like I felt like a kid again. Like I felt like a kid picking up a dog or a cat for the first time. Just like, am I doing this right? you know? So that's just a matter of, and I think that one is really solved by just kind of taking a look at some videos and learning how to hold a kid, how to change a diaper, how to swaddle effectively, because everything else is going to naturally take care of itself. Mm-hmm. And there's some really great tools about doing that. So there's the, am I going to hurt it kind of thing. So the only real thing to say here is that as a father, you create heat. And so as your body will create and generate heat. And if you're holding your kid and you sort of get like antsy and the kid's kind of getting antsy, it's a heat thing. It could be a heat thing.
Oh, wow.
Mom's body will regulate the temperature. So mom's body will cool down the baby and heat up the baby. Mm-hmm. So she's got another tool, but you've got the heat tool, right? So you've got that tool as a father, and then mom's got a different tool. And so that's something to just kind of, again, it's really just get in tune, like hang out, like what's your body doing?
Yeah. So what I'm hearing there is, if the baby's getting antsy, give it to mom. Right.
Sometimes, right? Like at that age, it's either it's going to be heat, more than likely it's going to be I'm hungry, or it's going to be I need to sleep.
Yeah.
So, like pretty much at the young age, that's what it's going to be. Because once they get older, they can self-regulate and do all that kind of stuff. So
Sure.
I forget the age. There's a specific age where they can do their own temperature regulation, but I forget that. So then this is all like the first couple of months. And then anything else, any other fear that happens at this stage is legit imposter syndrome. It's, and imposter syndrome it's like my guilty pleasure because here's the reality of imposter syndrome, right? So imposter syndrome is you're in a new situation. You don't quite know whether you can do it right. Like, and you're just kind of like, oh, do I really belong here? Well, guess what? It's a new situation. You've never done it before. You probably don't know what you're doing. You're just gonna have to figure it out. Right. There's no amount of training. There's no, outside of learning some of what I would call the hard skills or the soft skills of being a father, like communication techniques, swaddling, what music to listen to, like manners and stuff like that. Like, there's nothing. Everything else is experiential. It's one of those beautiful human experiences, both for mom and dad, that you can't. There's no video you can watch to teach you. It is a long-term, brand new, lifelong career, and you will be executing on it for the rest of your life.
A lot of times in the moment without, a lot of foreknowledge. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
So you have two kids, they have a pretty big distance apart between them. How's the dynamic with that? How, is that a manageable dynamic? Are there any kind of fears or anything else that are coming up in that dynamic that you have to work with?
I don't, this is good. So I was thinking the only fear I had was sort of like a much later fear for fatherhood is like a fear for somebody. I did have some reservation on, am I thrusting my eldest daughter into a caregiver role too early? Have I created a situation where she's losing out a little bit on her teenage years or her whatever, right? Because by the time that she can be a babysitter, she'll have a sibling that she can babysit. And then I was like, well, maybe, but another thing that, and this one is really central to Feel Good Fatherhood. It's a Stoic principle. And am I having part of it is one expression is, am I concerned or am I responsible? And so definitely concerned, but certainly not responsible. But another way to say it is just like the decisions that my daughter makes in her life are all her own. And I know there's going to be some of your listeners that are not happy with that I said that.
Right.
And the decisions that I make are all my own. And here's the one that, if they cancel or hating, maybe we're doing something well, but it's her decisions don't reflect on me and my decisions don't reflect on her. And right now, there's just another bundle of joy. There's just another thing to love that wants to love. Right? There's just another creature that is deserving of love and respect, wants some dignity with us, becoming a Twining. We're getting we're getting another at bat. We're doing it again, which is fun, and we're very different people, than even 10 years ago. And so it's like all of, and it's weird because it is this juxtaposed idea where, yes, everything that happens in your past is also creates who you are today, but it's the decisions you make in the moment that really determine like who you are today and what your life is going to look like tomorrow.
Yeah.
So for her, as far as dynamics, sure. There's she has much more responsibility. She's way more independent. She has her own set of chores. She's able to help out. There's a lot of we effectively have a much more responsible helper in the house. Whereas if we had two kids that were 2 or 3 years apart, that wouldn't really exist. But I think every family is going to have to navigate whichever dynamics they're going to create. Every father is going to have to deal with whatever it is that they're creating, because you do create and influence your environment. And so what I was saying earlier, this isn't a gaslighting moment. It's not like she's responsible for everything that happens in her life. That's not true. I can still create healthy or unhealthy environments, But the dynamic at play is really for this age gap is the first big dynamic is like I signed up for another 20 years.
Yeah, right.
There's that piece. That's one thing that I think about a lot. And, I'm in my low 40s. So I'm looking at, when she's 18, like graduating high school, potentially going to college, whichever path she chooses, I might be 60.
Right.
So that certainly has an impact. But it has certainly galvanized some really good habits in me of I have certain desires that I want. Like I would like to dance with them both at their wedding. Mm-hmm. So if I calculate in my head, average age that women get married today is low 30s. Okay. So that puts me at 70. Mm-hmm. So, and I want to be mobile. So part of that vision is not wheelchair bound or, infirm or anything like that. So it's like, okay. So that really, for me, that galvanized, was there a fear? I don't think I was afraid. It was more of I think it was a conversation I had with myself. It was like, hey dude, like you want to be there?
Yeah.
You're going to have to kind of plan for longevity a little bit better. We already have a great lifestyle and lots of good food and all, like, we have good creature comforts and we're very healthy.
Sure.
But there's certainly this can be optimized. I can further optimize this equation. I can get better and I think of there's only one time in my life where my body has been better than it is right now, and that was I was practicing Aikido when I was in high school, and like I played hockey all growing up. I played football. Like I did tons of stuff, but when I was doing Aikido, I was the most ripped. It was nuts. And I'm probably a couple months from joining the next. I have to find it's not the school. I have to find the dojo. That's doing it. The really reputable one here, the master retired. So I think the community kind of went its own way. But we're moving soon. So there's another at bat, so to speak, to find awesome. This next dojo. But I think I definitely think of this is bringing up something really good that I think that fathers do need to reconcile is. I do know that there's going to be some point where I'm going to die.
Yeah.
And have I set up my family to thrive? Is my wife going to be okay? Like, am I going to outlive my wife? That's something I think about sometimes. Odds are no. So like odds are no. And I think about, oh man, and it's like, it's weird here. Cause I'm kind of like, I don't want her to go through that pain.
Yeah.
And like part of it is just like completely like mind stupid stuff. Like I have zero control. I basically have zero control over that because I'm not suicidal. I don't have any of those depression issues. So, I'm going until like God's going to take me away one day.
Yeah.
That's it. Like, so I'm going until that happens. And then, but I do think, I think about now that I'm my age, it's like my parents are getting older and like, I've already lost my dad. I didn't really have a relationship with my biological father. And I think, if I were to really think about this, one of my big drivers for Feel Good Fatherhood and the brand that I'm building, the path that I'm on, is that like not having a relationship with my biological father. He wasn't really a healthy person, so that wouldn't have worked very well. Yeah. But we had zero relationship. And so the story is the year that my daughter was born was the year that he died.
Oh, wow.
So she was born, and then my sister and I were trying to contact him because we had been estranged for a time, I think about 15 years at that stage. And there was no desire for a relationship. It was more of just I kind of, hey, are you alive? Good, I'm alive. I have this other thing. She's alive. I just want to let you, it was kind of a more like a, hey, I just want you to know this is happening kind of thing,
Right.
And there may have been, I probably, if I, it would be unhealthy of me to admit that I didn't want the relationship, but I was comfortable with either outcome. It was kind of like 100% committed to finding, zero expectation of results. But for some reason didn't want to be found, and we couldn't find him. We pursued a private detective, like just nothing. Wow. And then later on, like basically over Christmas vacation, found out that he had died like a month or two before. And it's what was interesting to me here was what it brought up was this real desire to not create that. Like I try and live much more, and I think it's way healthier to have things that you're running towards, to have values that you're living into. They can be informed by things you don't want. And I think at that stage, part of my unhealthiness in those early years was me running away from things I didn't want. I ran away from not wanting to be there, as opposed to running towards I want to be present.
I see. That's a theme that comes up a lot. Yeah, that what are you doing? Are you running away from something? You're running towards something. And I think if any of the people listening can actually listen to that dynamic in anything they're doing in their life, whether it be parenting or life or work or relationships, that's important. And so that's a valuable nugget. And one thing I'd like to dig into a little bit is, the relationship that you had with your father, or the dynamic you had with your father, your biological father. And a lot of people, there's two directions people seem to go when that happens. Either they follow suit and they kind of emulate, their father, but you took that different path of not wanting to be that, and leaning really, really hard into purposeful fatherhood. What was the difference there that like made you want to lean into that instead of the alternate? Was it just your values, or how did that look?
There's a podcaster I very much respect, and he talked about how big pieces of his childhood, which he thought were very hard for him, became the strength later on. Well, I was very young when I realized there were a lot of things I didn't want in my life. Now, I love my stepfather, and he knows this, so I'm only speaking truth. There were some mannerisms and things that he was as a person, his control of his emotions, who he showed up as, that I did not want. It's like, I don't want that. I don't want to be that person. And so the rebellious, angsty, angry young Jay, right? like that kid, he rebelled against his life and said, these are the people you don't want to be like.
Yeah.
And so a big part of who I am today is just identifying people like, I don't want to be like you. I don't want to be like you. I don't like what you're doing. And just out, pointing fingers. Just like so low responsibility for my life.
Right.
And then it was right around when I went to college that I just started really taking much more ownership of who I was. I went to, and this is really where I started this path towards technically being comfortable around kids. So I worked at a summer camp. I ended up going to a summer camp. It was, the company's called Learning Forums, but it's called Super Camp. Don't worry.
Super Camp.
Make fun of it in the comments, guys. I know you want to. Make fun of it. Super Camp. Fantastic personal development, like really my first taste into personal development and academic skills, academic and leadership skills, rope courses, the whole things. And so I went as a student the first time through, and I ended up sticking around, and it became basically my summer job, where I just worked at this camp, taking kids through ropes courses and stuff like that. And it kind of created this like comfortability around certain age groups. So for instance, I'm not the biggest fan of elementary school kids. It's not really my comfort level. There's just, I'm a 6'1", 190 to 200 pounds, depending on how much I'm working out in my diet, wherever I am in the past couple of years. Like I'm a big, tall guy with that's kind of intense looking. If you're listening to the podcast, I'm kind of a little bit intense looking and a little bit intimidating to kids. And so like, if you think about, you're 2 feet tall and there's a 6 foot tall guy, a lot of the kids I didn't have the mannerisms or the face or the emotional state of being the jungle gym kid. Yeah. There's some guys are naturally a little bit more jungle gymmy. And right. the kids climb on them and they have fun, and there's that physical element. I just didn't have that. It wasn't really, I'm a video game and bookie guy. So big video gamey bookie guy. And so kind of, and being aware of that allowed me to say, oh, well, for these years at the summer camp, I'm going to work with middle school and high school kids. And that was kind of like really my sweet spot. Like I was like, oh, this, I get it. There's some maturity. I tend to not like light conversations. I don't really go shallow. I like deeper explorations and this kind of stuff. So that really worked well for me. But it made me comfortable in the environment, made me comfortable talking with parents, made me comfortable talking with kids. And what was weird is that I forgot about it. So I ended up, I graduated college, didn't really need that anymore. I was in the working world. And so another detail that we'll connect to in a minute is that I was really young. I always wanted to be a video game person. I always wanted to make video games. Didn't really have an understanding of what it was. And I had kind of given up because I went to school for programming, so software engineering, and I'm just not very good at it. Not very good at writing code. It just was never my strength. And so I just kind of wrote it off. I was like, okay, well, this is, I think even at the time, it was like being very comfortable writing code. And it was either writing code or project management. I didn't even know about project management at the time. Mm-hmm. That was the path. And so I thought like, oh, you have to learn how to write code to make a game. Like you have to. So I went to school and I learned, I did Pascal, C, and C++ in high school. I did a lot of C++ assembly in college. I have some good frameworks. I kind of understand some of the lower level, easy logic. Like all the kids, all the kids today, they're just kind of like, whatever, dude.
Yeah. I got a lot of C++ in college and high school too. So I know all about that. No,
yeah. So I did that kind of stuff. And
yep.
I kind of wrote it off because I just realized, like, I just kind of had this sense of, I don't want to beat my face against the wall here. Like, this is just not a skill. I'm not developing a competency here. I'm really, I'm trying to fill a weakness instead of pursuing something I'm good at. And so it wasn't until much later that it would have been, so where I grew up in Detroit. So I was, I was in the suburbs of Detroit, and I played a pen and paper game called Riffs from Palladium Books. I mean, since I was in grade school, like probably third, fourth, and fifth year. I had no idea they were 20 minutes down the street. And so in like, it was, I think it's 2006. I have trouble finding the specific dates, but in 2006, they had their first open house, and I went, and then I met the creator, and his name is Kevin Sembeda, and for how every once in a while you'll meet somebody and like I didn't even mean to, but he just kind of looked at me and he was like, "What do you want to do with your life?" Like just kind of the serendipitous moment, and then out of my mouth came, "I want to make video games." And then all the BS excuses came out,
Right. Why you can't do it, right? Why you don't,
I can't do it. I'm not good at this thing. I'm not good at that. I'm not good at that. And he just kind of looked at me and he just said, I was your age when I founded this. There's nothing stopping you. Mm-hmm. And I was like, whoa.
Wow.
and I kid you not, like 3 months later, I was making games.
That's incredible. 3 months later, huh? So, wow. Wow. Yeah. So did you get a job with him or a different company or where
different company? So I ended up moving away from Detroit. The company was called Vicarious Visions. They're a division. They're technically right now, as of this recording, they are Blizzard North. They were before that part of Activision. So there's this nice genealogy of that. Yeah. If you care, if you're in that space. But I mean, I've made 3 Marvel games. These are Marvel posters behind me. So if you're listening, check out Flow Over Fear on YouTube. Yeah. And I've got this blue one here is the Rebellion side because I made Marvel Ultimate Alliance 2, which is the Civil War version, and this is signed by Stan Lee right there.
Oh wow, that's cool.
Only ones in existence. So I'm proud of these.
Absolutely, yeah.
Kind of started this really nice decade-long journey where a lot of my driving force at that time was literally kind of full gusto, full what's the worst that can happen? Right. Going through that, and definitely took my licks, and took a lot of stuff happened in that time period. Would not trade it for anything, despite all the hurt and the pain. But also beautiful memories and I always say, because of that one situation with Kevin, I was like, look, if you've got a dream and there's a stupid reason why you're not pursuing your dream, because there's valid reasons and you might think they're valid.
Yeah.
That was air quotes for you listeners. Just make sure it's not you being afraid.
Yeah.
Because life happens on the other side of that door. And so when I was at those summer camps and I was teaching these kids, and we're putting them in their harnesses and putting them on the belay lines, and they're climbing 30 feet up, and they're on a little 6-inch platform, and we're saying, jump. Like, that's danger and that's fear. And we're pushing them to their edge.
Yeah.
And if there's something that you have an opportunity to, or something that you want to do, and it's this fear, this irrational fear that's not real, that's stopping you from doing that, you're effectively sacrificing your long term. You're sacrificing the potential of failing or the potential of succeeding for nothing. And so you're giving up what could be the greatest gift that you have to give.
Yeah.
And
that's
why Feel Good Fatherhood exists, because like, I don't want that to happen. I don't want any person, if everybody was activated, if everybody was in their genius. This is why I'm doing personal branding. It's why I did video games. It's why I have Feel Good Fatherhood. You gotta, if you're living in what you're great at and you're passionate about it, that's when magic happens.
Yeah.
If you're reasonable at something, but you do it for a very long time, that's when magic happens. When you combine the two, where you're good at it and you're passionate about it and you're uniquely talented to do it and you do it for a long time, you change the world.
Yeah, that's so true. Yeah, because that consistency is a key part of it, and that perfect blend, that Venn diagram of finding your talents, what you're good at, what you're adding value to the world, and doing it consistently. That's the unstoppable flywheel. Yeah, that's amazing. And yeah, you're so right that there's two really ways that we experience fear and danger, which evolutionary speaking, hundreds of thousands of years, that's the way we experienced it most of the time, was like, there's a freaking saber-toothed tiger around the corner. I don't want to, I'm afraid of that. Or there's a shark in there. But even though I don't know what a shark is, because we're a tribal species now. And yeah, anyway, but then there's the other type of fear that really is accelerated over the recently. And that's what we're all experiencing, is just this, like, the imposter syndrome, all of this, all of these head fears that you were talking about. So that's really powerful. And how we bring that into parenthood is so, just being aware of it and acknowledging it, like you say, I think is so important. And yeah, so Feel Good Fatherhood, so if you're looking for that on YouTube, it's at Feel Good Fatherhood. So you could search that on YouTube. So Jay, I do want to know though, because you mentioned you achieved a career that was, a lot of people dream of being like a video game designer, right? A lot of kids would say, man, I want to design games. My kid says that he wants to design games. So how did you find that experience, and like what eventually shifted your perspective onto moving into personal brands and what you're doing now?
I loved every minute of it. Even the icky, gross, messy, abusive, toxic parts. Again, I wouldn't change any of it. It's this gift of the past that sucked going through it, that present me can be like, oh man, like, look what I've done.
Yeah.
Like I think I've mentioned David Goggins before. Like, I think part of the reason why they go through Hell Week, if you know anything about SEAL training, there's Hell Week, look it up. If the part of that reason is that, like, you're building the muscle, like if you can overcome that, whatever the world throws at you, you're fine.
Yeah.
Right. And so, like, I went through my time at video games, like having this dream and pushing it out and publishing 3 Marvel games, working at Sony Online Entertainment, which was they're the originator of EverQuest, working with one of the original staff members. His name is Jeff. Love you, buddy. Working at these Dream Studios, I got to visit the Riot campus. The only campus I haven't visited is the Blizzard campus, and that's the one. Who knows? Like, if you're one of my old colleagues, and you're listening to this, I would love to go to the Blizzard campus, and I know you guys have a Starbucks. Maybe we can get coffee or something like that. It's one bucket list thing, so we'll figure that out at some other time. Sure. But absolutely, like I think from a perspective of I'm aligned, this is what I want to do, and I'm doing it, felt amazing. I mean, but it was hard. And there was constant. So, and I always said this. And so even in the perspective, I always tried to have, when I was at my good points, I had this perspective of gratitude. There's 10,000 kids behind me that would take my job in a heartbeat and for half of what I'm worth, like in the industry. And so there's always like, and there's a constant pressure when you're in the creative world. So everything's super lock and key. Like you're NDA'd to all ends of the earth. You can't talk about anything. Because the stakes are real. The stakes are super real. Yeah. And there's launch windows, and like I've been through a point where a publisher screwed us over when we launched the title, and it cost us millions of units.
Wow.
Millions of potential units, right? Okay. It cost us millions of potential units because when they did the timing, they released the big title of that year a week after. And if you know anything about game sales, like it just done. Like there's certain windows where it's like, okay, is Madden coming out? You don't release within a month of Madden. Is this coming out? You don't release within this time frame. So it was just kind of a different time for these kind of things. And I made big titles. So, I helped with a couple of Guitar Heroes and some other stuff I don't really talk about, but lots of really great opportunity. I think, however, whenever you get into any sort of creative endeavor where there's a lot of personalities, there's going to be a lot of friction and conflict. And part of, because I like ownership here, is that I wasn't the healthiest person. So I was bringing my own BS to the table, and I created some friction and conflict. But I was also on the receiving end of a lot of stuff that I think anybody today would say would be unfair. In the creative world of movies, TV shows, reality TV, video games, most of those worlds, it's not always healthy. And I think that if I were to impart any wisdom to anybody, would be it's never worth it to stay in a toxic environment. Just 100%. I stayed in the industry about 4 years, 2 jobs too long. And so if I were to go back, I would have left on the high note and then figured it out. However, again, I have no regrets. It's like, hey, I'm here who I am today because I spent those extra 4 years. What it really helped, and those extra 4 years were when my daughter was alive. So basically the moment for me when I had the biggest moment that I knew internally was a shift was I went to work. It was a regular day. It wasn't even crunch time. So just a regular day, went to work. My daughter wasn't awake.
Right.
Went to work, left at a regular time, drove home, walked right upstairs, woke up my baby, sung her lullaby to put her back to sleep. And I said, man, this is not the life you want.
Yeah.
And I knew it in here. I knew it right in my heart. I knew it really deep. It just took a while for me to figure it out. To figure out like what's going on, because I was like, I love making games. I love this world. I get to do all this cool stuff, And like, that was kind of like my head was saying all this stuff, but my heart was like, yeah, but family, and I got this other thing that I want to take care of, and these other people I want to be with, and I want to balance it. And so I had a reasonable amount of effort and time in the industry. It was a competency. And I was trying to leave. I tried to leave for a long time. And everybody was saying, like, you have 10 years. Why are you trying to leave an industry? Like everybody I ran up to, they were like, why are you trying to leave? Just go get another job. And I was like, because I don't want a freaking another job. Like, I don't want this lifestyle anymore. I don't want to crunch. I don't want to. And I've said before, if you're in the industry and you're a parent, because I know most of my old colleagues are parents now and they're still in the industry. If you like the lifestyle and you love doing it, keep doing it. Like, that's not the judgment on me. I'm not judging crunch. Like, that's just something that, like, the industry hasn't figured out, and maybe they won't. Some studios don't crunch. Some studios crunch all the time. Like, whatever. Like, that's just, you get what you signed up for. So you reap what you sow, you sleep in the bed you make. So that's your lifestyle. But if you don't want to do it anymore, like, if it's costing you, if
Yeah.
your life choices are costing you and you're afraid, and that was the thing for me. I was afraid that I couldn't build a life. I was afraid I couldn't, like, I was afraid that this was the best it was going to be. And so it just took me a long time to kind of figure it out. And that jump, that day, I mean, that day when I actually admitted that I didn't want to do this anymore, like, I think I was done for a week.
Mm-hmm.
Like I couldn't function for a week because it really was this shedding of, like, there was an entire part of me that was being retired.
Yeah. So that was a week. How long once you made that decision that I don't want to be here, did it take you to actually exit?
It was very quick.
Yeah.
It was very quick. So it was like the moment, I made the decision. I made the decision. I was actively transitioning out, and there was a downsizing. So,
oh, really?
Like,
yeah.
It was just kind of like this thing. It was like, yep, okay, here we go. And so, like, it was just kind of this serendipitous thing, and I kind of realized it was going on, and like I had a mental break. I thought, like, because I was there was next podcast, next interview,
Sure,
lots of stuff that was going on, but I just and it was really tough, and I had a lot of years where I was not earning a lot and figuring it out, but now it's I work from home. I walk my eldest daughter to her kindergarten bus stop, like the first time. I get home, I get to help her with things. I get to, we're going to go roller skating. So
That's
sorry,
awesome.
future honey. We're going to go roller skating, which she adores and loves. And we're going to go do that. And then for my youngest, I'm going to do the same thing.
Yeah.
But it's all because I decided that what I wanted in the long term was that availability. I wanted to be present. I wanted to cut the commute times out of my life.
Yeah.
I want to be present, and the reality of being a parent is that a lot of the mannerisms of work are not conducive to raising children. And if you're listening and you're from New Mexico, New Mexico has just done a statewide initiative where it's state-sponsored childcare. That's what they spent their COVID money on.
Oh, wow.
Or at least that's as I understand it. There's probably way more complicated things in there. But good on you, New Mexico. Good on you for helping parents, because we need it. We need the help.
Yeah, definitely. And that's, that's a great way to, a note to end on as far as where you're going, because it ties it all in a nice little bow and finishes the circle. Is that, if you're when you're looking at being a father, regardless of if you're staying in a career, or working from home, no matter how much money you make, where you're at in life, as long as you're able to be authentically you and present and feel good, as the podcast would say, I think that's all we can hope for. So I really hope, Jay, I know we've gone a little bit over here, and I'm grateful that you've spent some extra time with me, because all of that was so valuable. And definitely everybody check out the Feel Good Fatherhood podcast. And Jay, where can people, anywhere else people could find you, or anything else you're doing?
Yeah. So I'm most active on LinkedIn. So if you want to connect with me, I love it. Shoot me a DM, like either follow me, shoot me a DM. I kind of post the episodes, and I love having direct one-on-one conversations. That's probably the best place. Pretty much wherever else I'm a lurker. So, or you can, if you really want to, I would absolutely love it if you listen to some episodes and comment, just some comments, and engage, and let me know what you liked, what you didn't like, and stuff like that. Like, really just people that are participating and learning from the wisdom of collective other fathers. That's the entire purpose. The whole idea is we can talk to each other, and it's a resource for you. So if you want to take a listen, it's out there for you.
Yeah, well, it's a huge endeavor and a wonderful one at that. And it's a great show. And I'm grateful that you're doing that work, because we need more of that out there. We need to, fathers, we do need to know that we're not alone. We need to be able to, get that value from one another. So thanks for putting that value out there.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
And thank you, Jay. And thanks to everyone else out there for listening. Hope you got a lot out of this episode. And if you did, please hit the subscribe button and give me a rating, a review. And thank you. Yeah, wherever that thing is, right? Thanks so much for joining us. Look forward to catching you next time. See you soon. Thanks. Hey, everyone. Thanks for tuning in to the Flow Over Fear podcast. If you'd like to learn more about getting into flow and learn the foundations of flow, I have a free video series on my website at www.adamcliffordhill.com called The Foundations of Flow. Feel free to go there and download it and start your journey to rising above fear and achieving greater flow in your life. And if you like this episode, and I'm guessing you did if you stuck around for this long, then please do me a favor and hit the subscribe button, and you will receive notifications when I have new interviews, new recaps, and new trainings that pop up on YouTube. Thanks again for joining us.